nothing good happens in Vegas when you have free time and money.
An NBA G-league player and his teenage girlfriend are arrested in the disappearance of a Washington woman. After their arrests, investigators recovered her remains in the desert outside of Las Vegas, and the pair have now been charged with murder. Here's everything we know so far about the case of one-time Stockton Kings center Chance Comanche.
In terms of these players, they have lots of money and many times lots of free time. Vegas is the wrong place to be.
23-year-old Mariana Rogers was last seen on December 5th in Las Vegas, Nevada. She wasn't reported missing until 2 days later on December 7th. Retired FBI agent Colin Schmidt says those 48 hours are incredibly valuable.
Generally speaking, when I was working kidnapping cases, if you didn't find the person within 48 hours, the likelihood of them being deceased went up dramatically. Now, there was occasionally times when an actual kidnapping versus an abduction murder, but those would come with a ransom demand. So then we would know that, have an idea that the person was still alive. But in this case, if you don't find the person within the first 48 hours, either they want to be not found or something bad happened to them.
Schmidt says the investigation into her disappearance likely began with Rogers' cell phone data.
I would start with cell phones. So basically you have her phone number. She's obviously got the phone with her, but first thing they're probably going to do is with her phone number is ping that phone number and do basically a fugitive investigations and try to find out where the phone is. Because in society now, our phones are tethered to our bodies. So you find the phone, you find her.
Especially since she went missing in Las Vegas, my next question is would they have looked at security video? Because surely there's a lot of that around the casinos and shops and bars in that area.
Absolutely. Once they ping the phone and find out its last known location, they'd probably go backwards and start going, and she's in these casinos, who she's with, who she's interacting with, and then basically find out why they're there. If they are playing, pull their player cards, see what slot machines they're going to, and just basically put together a timeline of what she's doing. And frankly, in Vegas, you can do a photographic timeline because every single inch of that city is under some sort of video surveillance.
Rogers was last seen with 19-year-old Sakari Harnden and her boyfriend, Chance Comanche. Investigators say there was a prearranged get-together between Rogers and Harnden, with plans for Comanche to tag along. The same day, December 5th, Comanche's team, the Stockton Kings, played the G-League Ignite, a team based in Henderson, Nevada. The city, about 20 minutes southeast of Las Vegas, is where Rogers' remains would be found weeks later. And in this case, investigators said right away that they suspected foul play. What would have led them to that assumption that something went astray here?
Well, once again, they probably understood the people that were involved in this, and they may have already had investigations into these people. And then when this happened, they're like, okay, it ended up being, the so-called usual suspects. And then the fact of how this person disappeared, and where they disappeared from, and then that would have been, frankly, the first crime scene, and then going to that crime scene, and then they would have seen some things that would have led them to believe that there was something bad happening here.
Schmidt says it was likely cell phone data that connected both Comanche and Harnden to Rogers' case.
It was cell phones. They probably saw the caller activity on her phone, and then saw a lot of phone calls going through these two people, and then the phones were probably all in the same place. They probably did something called a tower dump, where they dropped all of the phones off of the tower that were pinging off that tower, and then to see if these people were in the same location of her phone. So I'm sure there's, and frankly, Metro PD is very, very good at this because it is Las Vegas. There was probably quite a bit of cell phone forensics going on in this case, and then they likely recovered her phone, and then they're going to pull all kinds of stuff, all kinds of photographs, all kinds of bad things off of her phone as well as their phones.
Harnden was arrested first on December 13th on charges of kidnapping. She was booked into the Clark County Detention Center on $500,000 bail. Days later, on December 15th, Comanche was arrested by FBI agents in California. At the time of their arrests, Rogers' remains had not yet been discovered. And if we're looking at the arrests here, what's interesting is that when Comanche and Harnden were both arrested, a body or remains had not yet been found. And reports say that investigators actually learned more information about where those remains were. They were led to the remains after the arrests. So, what sort of information do you believe that either of the suspects revealed after they were arrested?
Likely, they were put in separate rooms and they started pointing fingers at each other. And then one of them cracked, and then they took that information and leveraged the other person to speak to tell the truth as well. And so it sounds like they just good old fashioned police work. Interviewed both of them, confronted them with the evidence, interviewed them separately, and then one of them gave it up, and then they just probably took that over to the other one, and the other one gave it up because it's most likely these guys are trying to throw each other under the proverbial bus.
So, if there was some sort of confession here, is it possible that they could recant it in the future?
Yes, it's always possible, and that's one of my specialties at the tail end of my career was corroborated confessions. They can, if you have all the evidence, you confront them with the evidence in a proper legal manner, and they confess, and then they go back and recant the confession. It really is meaningless because they have already said they did it, and many times in a confession, they'll give details that you weren't already aware of that only they could know. And then if they did recant, so to speak, it would be meaningless to the jury because they're going to be like, wait a second, he knew something and nobody else would have known.
So far, Rogers' cause of death has not publicly been released. Schmidt says investigators will make sure her family has been notified before the news breaks, but the condition of her remains will play a major role in the investigation.
It depends on how long the body was in the desert. There's decomposition is frankly based upon weather conditions and the pace of decomposition, and then there's also the possibility that animals could have got to the body and pulled the remains apart. So there's going to be quite a bit of investigation from the medical examiner, and then they'll come out with a report, and then that will be the time when the victim's family is notified, and then they share that information with the public.
Harnden and Comanche were eventually charged with Rogers' murder. While the Stockton Kings put out a statement saying Comanche has been dropped from the team, Schmidt says some of his former teammates could be questioned in the murder investigation. And one of the reasons that this story has gained national attention is because he is a G-league basketball player. So a lot of people are questioning that. Is it possible that his fellow teammates or coaches could be questioned about this?
Well, it all kind of depends, the lawyer answer there. Um, Frankly, these kids, and they are kids, they kind of go off and they only do their own thing. And these NBA teams have security apparatus. They do sit down with these players, and most of them are frankly retired FBI agents, and they give them information. They kind of give them training on how to behave, so to speak, and what not to do, and who to hang out with, who not to hang out with. And it's highly probable that he ignored that training and he went ahead and did his own thing anyway. And the other player, to answer your question, yeah, if the other players kind of come up on the cell phone forensics, yeah, they're going to be questioned. They're not going to get a pass on any of this because, frankly, the number one priority here is justice for the victim.
When you were talking about that training that some of these basketball players or athletes are to receive, what sort of examples would you have, like hanging out with the quote unquote right crowd or how to stay away from trouble, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, some things that you might be common sense to me as a retired FBI agent is not necessarily common sense, as Mark Twain famously said, common sense is not common with everybody. And just basically sit down, like, okay, do not get in a car with somebody who has a firearm. Okay, do not be around somebody who has drugs. Do not go out after midnight. You know, do not party in Vegas. Something as simple as that. Because frankly, in terms of these players, they have lots of money and many times lots of free time. Vegas is the wrong place to be. Quite frankly, they should be at home. Watching TV or whatever, because nothing good happens in Vegas when you have free time and money.
Do you really think it's possible that these mentors, so to speak, would say, stay away from Las Vegas?
I think so. I mean, especially the senior players. I mean, they're very These they're professionals for a reason. I mean, we still see people making mistakes in all of sports, but the guys that really last are the ones who understand the risk of being in the public eye, and they will tell these younger players, hey, don't do that, don't do this, and more importantly to them is you're going to make us look bad. If you screw up, you're going to make us all look bad. So there's a culture and pressure amongst the players for them to kind of behave, so to speak, because it's a brand and they don't want the brand to be tarnished.
As for Rogers' murder, Schmidt says the investigation is far from over. Right now, we have those 2 arrests in connection to Mariana Rodgers' murder. Do you think that the investigation is still ongoing now? I know there's enough evidence to charge at least 2 people, but is the investigation still continuing on?
Oh, absolutely. They're going to make sure anybody that was involved in this, especially with the notoriety of this case, they're going to anybody and everybody that has any information is going to get interviewed. Once again, I'm harping on the cell phones, but those cell phones are going to tell the story. They're going to pull off all the caller ID or caller activity, and then everybody on there is going to probably end up getting interviewed one way or the other.
Right now, Comanche is being held without bail. He's set to appear in court in California on Tuesday and is currently awaiting extradition to Las Vegas. Reporting for Law&Crime Network, I'm Sierra Gillespie.